This video is rated B for you'd better back on out of here if you don't want spoilers, buddy. Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO that's well loved for its characters and story arcs, and it's easy to see why. This game has quite the colorful cast, with a variety of backgrounds, personalities, and reasons to do what they do. The Scions of the Seventh Dawn are just one example of many factions that follow this writing structure, as many groups in the game are made with similar methods. However, not every scene said characters are in knocks it out of the park, and emotional shock will only take you so far in the long term, because once the initial high of that scene fades away, you'll never be surprised by the tension and stakes of that moment ever again. Yet, there are some scenes in Final Fantasy XIV that are so well written that they do in fact have staying power, and the reason for this is often for a variety of unique factors. Today, I'll be going over what I think is one of the best cutscenes in the entirety of this MMO. But before I begin, I pose a challenge to you, the viewer. If you feel there's a cutscene or interaction in Final Fantasy XIV that's underrated, then make sure to say which one and why in the comments below. In fact, if you're a Final Fantasy XIV content creator, I dare you to make a video to explain why you love a particular scene so much. But with all of that out of the way, let us begin. Having played Final Fantasy XIV since 1.0, I've gotten the chance to see how this game's story and characters have changed from start to finish. It's been a wild ride for sure. There are some characters and choices that I have nothing but praise for, and today we'll be covering one of those, because my nomination for the best written exchange in Final Fantasy XIV goes to the Butcher's Blood cutscenes from the Stormblood expansion.
The bastards that killed him. The bastards that let it happen. My father deserved better. I swore I'd do whatever it took to make them pay.
Stormblood gets a lot, and I mean a lot, of flack from players. Some of the reasons I completely agree with, and others I feel are a bit over-exaggerated to say the least. I find quite often that people on the internet will just hate things for the sake of hating them. Bandwagons and peer pressure are a powerful thing indeed. In fact, I feel safe in saying that Stormblood wasn't as horribly written as people say. At least, not when compared to other games that have demonstrated what even longtime fans would consider to be complete and utter incompetence on the writer's end. No, I've always felt that Stormblood has had the unfortunate circumstance of being wedged between two extremely popular expansions, and its greatest failure was trying to make the player care about too many different things too quickly. However, there are some moments here that resonate with the same level of talent that even the best expansions of this game have had, and one of those moments was in the Butcher's Blood. For those who don't remember, the Butcher's Blood cutscenes follow the Warrior of Light's interaction with an imprisoned Fordola in the dungeons of Alamigo. These events play out in 4 distinct scenes, each of which telling an entire story and revealing more about the characters involved than one would notice at first glance. There is a lot to unpack here, so let's start at the beginning. The first scene opens up with a group of Alamigan citizens gathered outside a holding facility. Someone within the Alamigan resistance, likely an upset soldier, has let it slip that Fordola is being held here, and an angry mob has gathered at its gates, calling for her head. Fordola, or the Butcher as she was called, was responsible for many acts of violence, terror, and some public executions during the Garlean occupation.
It's true then! The bitch really is in there! I knew it! I bloody knew it! We demand vengeance! Bring her out! Today we butcher the butcher!
She and her associates willingly worked alongside the Empire, making the rest of Alamigo see her lot as betrayers. At first, it's entirely understandable that these people would seek justice for the loved ones that were beaten, kidnapped, or murdered by Fordola and her crew. It's likely the same feeling that most people would have. On her own, Lise is unable to dissuade the crowd, but then a bellowing voice echoes over the district. The Bull of Alamigo, Raoban Alden, has heard the commotion and came to investigate. It was only thanks to a moving speech about proving themselves better than savages that most of the people assembled were able to calm down. But notice that I said most. The cutscene makes it very clear that at least one person was not entirely diffused. And just like that, the rule of twos is now in play. If one person feels that way, it's likely there's at least one other that does so as well. However, this scene ends before that can be resolved, meaning that the tension built in this moment is not entirely allowed to dissipate. If all the people gathered together immediately agreed with Raoban and left, all the emotional stakes in this scene would have been gone. But by showing that there are still people who aren't okay with this, there's a slim chance that drama could break out again, subtly teasing the player's future expectations. The brilliance in this first scene is that it does a lot of work, but it's ultimately not very important because, in the end, it's setup. This scene is a framing device to make the remaining three hit that much harder. And not only that, we get some subtle character development here as well. This event proves that Lise hasn't won over the respect and trust of the people yet, despite being touted as the resistance leader and liberator of Alamigo. It proves that she has yet to rise to meet her station. Not only that, but Raoban is shown to have taken his time in Ul'dah to heart, as such an impassioned speech was something that he became used to delivering once he was a member of Ul'dah's syndicate. So, in summary, Scene 1 is not only an excellent framing device, but reveals the position in which some of these characters are narratively without pulling direct attention to them. Then we move on to Scene number 2. Now the stage has been set, and the performance can officially start as the Warrior of Light and company go to speak with Fordola in her cell. Fordola remarks how funny it is for her to get so much attention by so many different people, and she's not wrong. Most prisoners of war wouldn't get this kind of reception by so many important individuals.
So many visitors. Come to have a good laugh, have you?
Nevertheless, she tries to say things that would usually provoke a violent response. This, of course, doesn't work, as that's not how the Scions operate.
I killed your men. I killed my men. And you know what my only regret is? That I didn't kill you when I had the chance!
However, think back to Scene number 1. If she had said those words to anyone outside, they immediately would have tried to murder her, and she knows it. Fordola isn't stupid. She understands how basic and impulsive the common man and woman is. But unfortunately for her, she's not dealing with normal people, and Arenvald quickly calls Fordola out for such a cheap tactic. This is actually an incredible moment for Arenvald as a character, because most of his interactions up to this point have painted him as a very polite, reliable, and often soft-spoken kind of character. But here, it's shown that when someone does or says something he knows for a fact to be untrue, he can become quite passionate. Arenvald is one of the player's few allies that actually has the Echo, and as such, was able to see a flash of Fordola's past earlier in the expansion. He knows her better than she understands, and as such, knows exactly what to say in order to turn her tactics against her. But as soon as he begins to dismantle her reasons and logic, the Warrior of Light's own echo activates, and we're ushered into Scene 3. It's within this echo flashback that we see how one bad day can turn what would have been an unassuming individual into a vengeful butcher. The Warrior of Light observes Fordola in her younger years as a child living under Garlean occupation. After all, Ala Mhigo fell to Garlean rule 20 years ago, so the timetable in regards to her age makes sense. However, this scene reveals the tragedy that comes from hysteria and spite. It's revealed that Fordola's parents willfully sided with the Garleans at some point after the occupation, placing them in better social standing. But this also reveals that they didn't do so out of hatred for Ala Mhigo and its people. Not at all. Fordola's father proves that all he did, all he sacrificed, was for his daughter and his family. After all, national pride can't feed your child, so he did what he felt was necessary for the ones he loved. But not everyone sees these acts in the same light. To many Ala Mhigans, he wasn't a man looking out for his loved ones. He and his family were traitors. A random passerby proves just how despondent and detached the people of Ala Mhigo were under Garlean rule. They had overthrown the Mad King, only to be forced into submission by a new ruler. This man represents the resentment of Ala Mhigo's citizenry, not just toward Garlemald, but anyone who has it better than them. These events make sure to prove just how petty and snide this man is, because what sane adult would look at a child, a little girl, and call them such awful things with a smile on their face? From here, the scene only gets worse, proving just how unstable and willfully violent your common Ala Mhigan is. Because someone as frail as an old woman is seen throwing stones at a defenseless child. Her actions give a twisted sense of courage to those around her, as someone else attempted to strike Fordola with a rock. It was only because of her father that she's shielded from their brutality. Now he is defending her both literally and figuratively, and what comes next is the core moment in Fordola as a character. A large man with a bigger than normal stone throws it with all his strength at the two of them, striking the father in the head, resulting in his death. The deranged crowd cheers at this misery, pain, and violence. And you can bet that many of them would claim that this was justice, that the man deserved what he got for betraying Ala Mhigo, when in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. Justice does not curse at children. Justice does not throw stones at an innocent little girl. This was madness. And the scene portrays this perfectly. Because while it's true that the Garlean guards nearby did nothing to stop them, these actions proved once again that Garlemald was correct in their bias. These people were acting like the savages they called them, and were unworthy of their attention. But before the scene ends, we see a fully matured Fordola. She's grown up with the murder of her father ringing in her head, and is prepared to do whatever it takes to make everyone around her pay for that cruelty. It was Ala Mhigo, not Garlemald, that created the butcher, and they did so with smiles on their faces. They had no one to blame but themselves for the horrors that were about to come, and thus ends Scene 3. Honestly, I could dedicate an entire video as to why this flashback is so well written. Because ultimately, even if you had no idea who Fordola was or why Ala Mhigo has the reputation it does, after this scene, you're left with everything you need to know about her and this country's social climate. But just like that, the echo fades away and the Warrior of Light is brought back to the present, leaving us in Scene 4 with the final and most important event in this entire series of cutscenes. The scene returns to Arenvald successfully provoking a response from Fordola, revealing the truth behind her motives. She didn't just want to die, she wanted to prove a point. Remember how I said scene 1 was just a framing device? Well, here it is. The people outside screaming for Fordola's head is the same madness that killed her father in the flashback. These people will shout that it's for justice, but in reality, all they want is an excuse to commit more violence, a way to vent out their frustrations and anger, never realizing that they themselves are at the heart of their own torment. They are at the heart of a vicious cycle. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, violence begets violence over and over and over again. This is why Fordola wanted to be executed by Alamigo, because to her, this proves her point. This proves that the people of Alamigo aren't some proud nation. They're crazy, and she was going to show the entire world this truth. And maybe, just maybe, if she takes in all that hate, it might die with her. Maybe this will finally break that cycle of violence. Which brings us to the climax of these cutscenes and a brilliant moment in Final Fantasy XIV's writing. Her heightened emotional state brought on by Arenvald causes the resonance to activate, and the one person it attaches to is you, the Warrior of Light. Fordola's mind is bombarded with visions and memories of the events that had led you up to this point. The pain, the power, violence, hatred, madness, and more, all happening over and over again and again, tormenting her mind until it finally stops. She was prepared to argue and scream at you all, but after having seen everything the Warrior of Light has been through, she has been given a brief moment of complete empathy.
You. All that power. All that pain. It's too much. Too much for anyone. The things they've done to you. The lies. The betrayal. The endless fighting. Yet there you stand. Unbroken. How? Why?
To this very day, Fordola is the only character in Final Fantasy XIV who understands the Warrior of Light on this level. She's not wrong for being mad at Alamigo for what they did to her and her father, but the Warrior of Light has dealt with the world's madness, not just a nation's. This puts everything into perspective for her, completely taking the wind out of her sails and draining any desire to argue with you all. Mind you, this doesn't change her. She's still furious at a world she felt had turned its back on her and her family. But seeing the Warrior of Light's memories had given her context she had never had before. This right here is why these cutscenes are so great. Never has the Warrior of Light's presence caused such a dramatic and sudden tonal shift in a character like this, from full of energy and anger to simply being exhausted by clarity, something that wouldn't have been possible without her bootleg echo. And just like that, the Butcher's Blood cutscenes end, with an emotionally defeated Fordola who now has the memories of another to measure her life against. Whether you like Fordola or not, you gotta admit, these cutscenes did so much in so little time. We got very brief and subtle character development for Lise, Raoban, and Arenvald, as well as context for Alamigo's social climate both past and present. Alphinaud was there for God knows why, he doesn't say or do anything the entire time. But we do get a complete character workup for Fordola, and the delicious icing on the cake, a moment for the Warrior of Light's past actions to have a profound impact on a scene without any unnecessary posturing. Usually, the Warrior of Light has to do or say something to prove their point, but this is one of the extremely rare cases in Final Fantasy XIV story where your actions simply speak for you. But there you have it. This is why I love the Butcher's Blood cutscenes so much. There's a lot to take away from them in just a few moments. Not only that, this was written during a time that people insist that Final Fantasy XIV's writing was at its worst. I'll admit, I'm not afraid to give Final Fantasy XIV and its characters a hard time now and then, but when I have such nuanced cutscenes like this to compare them to, can you really blame me? Honestly, this isn't the only collection of cutscenes I wanted to use for this video. I was really tempted to use As Goes Light, So Goes Dark from Heavensward, as well as the Admiral's Duel in Limsa Lominsa, cause these scenes are also amazingly written as well. However, I gotta give it to Butcher's Blood, as it did just as much, if not more, in less time. But I think I've rambled on long enough. Don't forget, my friends, tell me what you think are among the best scenes in Final Fantasy XIV. I look forward to seeing your comments. So, until next we meet, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Amina Viltaria, Travanchet, Vavalisoma, Sage Mouse, Sinalv Bagel, and Cizani, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.